Hello there, welcome back. I'm Robin Norgren. You know, my daily vlog on my life as an empty nester and someone who wants to get out of teaching. So here is my subject for the day, and the subject is what happens if you want to buy a house? Okay, here's my story time. All right, you guys, so listen up. As I mentioned, we moved here fresh from Arizona. Part of the reason why we moved here from Arizona is because we are interested in buying a house, and it was getting to the point where you could not afford housing in Arizona. And so one of the reasons why we thought it'd be a nice idea to move to Ohio is because it would give us the opportunity to buy a house. Now, what would happen though if you decide to change careers and also want to buy a house? So a couple of days ago, as I was plugging along, going to all my job interviews, suddenly it hit me. You know how you just have this fleeting little thought? And the question was, do you remember that you want to buy a house? And I was stopped in my tracks because I was like, uh-oh, I do remember that. I actually remember a few years back, quite a few years back now, when we were attempting to buy a house in Arizona. We had gotten pre-approved. As I mentioned, we are a military family, got pre-approved through USAA, which you would think pre-approved means you've got no problem. They've already done all their due diligence. And so we had found a house, we put an offer on the house, the offer was accepted, and we started going through the process of getting the inspections and all of those things. And then suddenly someone decides to give me a call, and they say, actually, we don't know if your income will be able to qualify for be a part of the qualification process for the house. And we were like, well, what's going on? And they're like, I'm a teacher, right? And they're like, oh yeah, we understand you're a teacher, but when you listed on your application, the places that you worked, because, as I've mentioned, I was a military wife, so I was always moving. So there would be times where I would have gaps in my employment because, I would be in a state where I necessarily, for example, I was a Montessori teacher, and I couldn't necessarily work as a Montessori teacher if there were no Montessori schools in the area, right? So there were a couple times when that happened. And they said, well, when we gather together all of the months that you have been a teacher, you don't have enough months, consecutive months, to be able to buy a house. And so therefore, even though we thought we were in the clear and we were on our way to be homeowners, we could not get the house. All right. So again, as I'm going through this process, I am struck by this thought, and I am so glad I was struck by the thought, because I then started to kind of backpedal on this whole lofty idea of burning the bridges and burning everything behind me and never looking back and teaching, because I really needed to decide, are we going to buy a house? So I've been thinking about maybe ways that I could maybe transition out of teaching, either to get a job that is part-time at a grocery store or in some other line of work, and then still work as a teacher, maybe in a capacity that's not so stressful. Maybe I don't have to take the work home. Maybe I'm not the lead teacher. Maybe I'm a co-teacher, and we're sharing the load. And so those are the things now that I've been kind of processing as I'm going through my interviewing process. Now, in the last couple of days, I've had a couple of interviews. I had one interview with a Whole Foods where I was offered a second interview, and it was for a customer service lead. So when they called me, I had sent in my resume, probably about 3 weeks ago. And that resume had literally just teaching on it. But because they saw my undergrad in business, the hiring manager was very thoughtful and, called me and said, yeah, I know you have your resume here as a teacher, but I see your undergrad. So have you worked in retail? Have you done supervisory work before? And I said, oh yeah, I actually have. I've worked at Barnes and Noble. I've worked at a pottery painting place. I've worked at Starbucks. I've run my own business. So yes, I have lots of experience as a supervisor and also in customer service. And she goes, okay, good. I'm glad I called. So I'm going to, I'll set you up for this interview. And she goes, oh, but by the way, I see that you have open availability, except you have Sunday blocked out. And I go, yeah, I'm, absolutely open any of the other days. And she goes, yeah, in order to be considered for this job, you actually have to have completely open availability. And I said, what? I said, so you mean there's never a time I would have like a weekend off? And she goes, oh no, if you put in for it, you could probably have it. I said, well, then does this mean that I would not have a set schedule? And she goes, you'd have a relatively set schedule, but no, you wouldn't necessarily have a set schedule. And I said, so basically my life would have to completely revolve around this job. Whatever the job have I had like this? Teaching? This doesn't sound like it's going to be a good fit for me. So anyway, I just kind of said, hey, can you go ahead and pull my head, my name out of the ring as far as you're concerned, because if you have something part-time, I'm happy to do that. But I can't give my whole life away. That's basically what I'm trying to get out of. But also the weather is starting to change in Ohio. And so on top of the rain, the last 2 days, it has been between 38 and 42 degrees. You guys, if I would have taken that coffee shop job where I was doing the drive-through line, I wouldn't have made it. I told my husband, I said, it would have been the first time I would have walked off a job because she doesn't like the cold. That's why she stayed in Arizona so long. And even like when we were, traveling around and being deployed in different places and relocating, we always went back to Arizona because I do love my sunshine. So anyway, I thought that was pretty funny. But okay, so at the end of the day, so there is that. And so I have 2 interviews this week. One for a co-teaching job, set hours, of course, but I do not have to run the show. The other person is actually considered the lead, so very good. And then there is another job very similar to that. It is actually a preschool teacher job. So again, not necessarily having to hit certain markers, as far as like having to prepare them for school, if you will. So these 2, I feel like could be possibilities now that I've come back to the reality of, yeah, you actually have this one big goal that's still hanging out there that you want to do. And so you actually do need to pay attention and be wise about your transition. So again, I really hope that these videos are helping, because I think at the end of the day, it's like I'm really trying to, in real time, take you from the moment that I had this thought to today, where I'm like, okay, well, not so much of this, maybe a little bit of that. It's not that it couldn't be in my future to completely transition out of it, but it would definitely not be the wisest choice at this point. So I have a question for you. How have you, if you are one who has transitioned out of teaching, or you're one that's thinking about transitioning out of teaching, is there kind of a step-by-step plan that you are following in order to make that change? Are you just jumping out just fully out of it and starting your own thing? Have you got a game plan, and is it like a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan? I really would be interested in learning from others how you actually get out of the profession, because the fact of the matter is, especially if you're someone, like ourselves, where, we're still, needing to work for sure. We do, we help pay for tuition for our daughter. We have bills to pay, right? It's not like we're debt free yet. And so we do have lots of things that are still very pragmatic as far as why this type of work has worked for me for so long, because still getting the summers off allowed me to do things like run a side business, which I do run a side business where I teach, I write curriculum and things for the classroom, and those things have served me very well. But how do you take on from decision making to move out of teaching or any profession to actually actualizing that into reality? So yeah, let me know in the comments down below.